Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Namaduhu wa nasalli ala Rasul al-Kareem. Assalamu alaikum. In the previous video, there was a discussion about how Islam was able to end the problems of alcoholism, racism, gambling, riba, how the Islamic system brought prosperity, peace, tranquility to the people, to millions of people, and how the other systems have failed, the other ideologies like capitalism, socialism, communism, secularism, all these other competing ideologies have failed and brought misery to millions and billions of people all over the world. This point has to be stressed that Muslims have to take the lead in bringing the right thinking to the people of the world. The Muslims of today, unfortunately, because of domination by non-Muslim countries, non-Muslim ideologies, have fallen into the trap that all other ideologies are superior and can bring benefit to humanity. So this is the same one-eyed approach which science has. Science just looks at the material part of the human being. All these ideologies that are competing with Islam are one-eyed, like the Dajjal who is to come before the end of times. They just look at the material side of the human being and forget that the human being is not just material, is also a spiritual being. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created the human being with both materialism and spiritualism. The spiritualism comes from Allah and the materialism comes from the earth. The human being is a combination. He has the qualities of an angel and he also has the needs of animals. And this is what makes this creation of Allah superior to all other creation. So the human being has been blessed with both capabilities. So science looks at only one side of the human being, and therefore it cannot bring benefit to the human being as a complete human being. So Islam is a complete system that brings benefit both to the material side as well as the spiritual side. There is no other system, no other ideology that has the tools to bring about the spiritual development of a human being. It is said that when the Dajjal comes, he will be given in tremendous power by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a test for the people. From the material standpoint, his power will be beyond what we have today. The test of today is the science. Science is the God, astaghfirullah, for the millions and billions of people. And the Dajjal will have more power than what we see today in the hands of people of science. It will be a big test. It will be a big fitna. And that's why all the prophets sought refuge in Allah from the fitna of the Dajjal. But we are not at that point yet. And even then, we are falling into the trap of the one-eyed approach of science and secularism. So we think of human beings just as robots, as machines, and try to solve the problems through material means. And that's why no results are coming. We've seen recently in the United States the riots, the protests over racism. And all efforts have been made in the past to combat, to fight this curse of racism. But science politicians, all the material, the secular approach cannot solve that problem. And Islam successfully solved this problem. And this is something which most people are not aware of. That the way to handle the problems of the dunya, of this world, are through the system that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has devised. And that system is for all times to come. And this is the challenge of today. Like in the time of the Dajjal, that it will be the spiritual power of Isa alayhi salam, Jesus, that will kill the Dajjal. The Dajjal will not be killed by missiles and bombs and rockets. It will be the spiritual power of Isa alayhi salam, and he'll dissolve like salt dissolves in water. This is something that we know from the Quran, that spiritual power is always greater than the material power. The prophets had been blessed with spiritual power, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught that. He gave instructions, he taught the Sahaba how to use the spiritual power. The Sahaba used that, and they were successful. And this is a challenge for all mankind, to learn how to use the spiritual power. And only Islam has all the tools. Islam has all the detailed, it's a complete system by itself. Just like it takes years and years to learn science and benefit from science. Similarly, to benefit from the spiritual system of Islam, one needs to spend time and develop spiritually. This is a challenge. This is very important education that is completely lacking. The whole world is looking at the material education, education that deals with the material side of the human being, and ignoring completely the spiritual side. And spiritual side does not mean sitting in meditation. A lot of people today are misled. They're confused. They think spiritualism means just sitting cross-legged and meditating. This is not spiritual development. Spiritual development comes the same way as was taught by Rasulullah. And a lot of people who think they are engaged in spiritual development are simply wasting their time. That spiritual development has already been shown to the world through the example of Rasulullah. He's the only prophet about whom so much information is available. The previous prophets had spiritual power, but we do not have the same kind of information about them. As was mentioned in a previous program, even the salat, the prayer of Isa alayhi salam, the prophet who preceded Rasulullah by about 600 years, we do not have enough information about his life as we have about Rasulullah. And if you go back in history, we know very little about the previous prophets. So if anyone wants to develop spiritually, he will have to study the life of Rasulullah. That is the only model available to mankind. And that, of course, is found in books, is found in a lot of material all over the world. And people should start looking into that if they want to develop spiritually. The human being is not just an animal who has animal needs. This is one of the big tragedies of the modern times, that the human being has been brought up to think that he's just an animal, and all he has is animal needs. And once those needs are satisfied, he will be happy. And that is a big misconception. It's a big, big mistake. The sooner the human being realizes that his problems are because of something else, not because of material loss, it's because of some other reason, he will come on the right track. The Muslim Ummah, the Muslims all over the world, are also confused. They have seen a lot of material progress in the world by the unbelievers, and they have become so mesmerized, so overawed by that, they've stopped looking at the spiritual side. We see from the attitude of millions of Muslims all over the world that they do not think the solution is in the spiritual development. The attitude is that the progress will come only with regards to the materials progress. And this will be the great test during the time of Dajjal. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will show the people of that time that the real power is the one that comes from Allah. Dajjal's power will be so much, he will kill a person and bring him back to life. And people will be convinced that he is God. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will show that whatever power he has, the material power, the wealth, the resources, they are no match for the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this, of course, has been predicted by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and will happen before the end of times. At this time, the struggle is with regards to the faith of the believers. It has been shaken by the advancement of science and technology. They have stopped looking into the spiritual development and started looking only in the material development. The children are being educated only in science, and they're only being given education that relates to the material side of the human being. And they've forgotten that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a different way of solving different human problems. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had no resources of the dunya. He was not given resources of dunya. It was not given. He was offered, but he did not take it. And he showed the world that it's not the material resources that solve problems. It is Allah who solves the problems. And when a person is connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through prayers, as shown by him, and through deeds that are pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings success to him. And this has been said in the previous programs, how the Sahaba, his companions, without any resources, without any numbers, there were no match with regards to the numbers or the material resources to the enemies they were facing. But because they had reached such a high level of spiritual development, the help of Allah was with them. And wherever they went, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made them successful. And the problems we discussed, the evils we discussed last time, like the evil of alcohol and gambling and riba and racism and all types of other deeds that were bringing misery to humanity, were completely wiped out in a short period of time. And this period of time should be required education, not only in Muslim countries. It should be required education in countries that have no knowledge of how this system worked. So it is to the benefit of humanity that they should look into that part of history and see how the problems they were facing, how they were solved. And those problems are existing today, as we see in the United States. How many people have protesting, and how much hatred there is, and how it affects the whole system. And the people in power, the leaders, they're completely helpless. They have no idea how to solve this problem. And these things keep happening. They have no idea how to solve the problems of gambling, the problem of alcoholism, the problems that are brought by riba, interest, how the poor are being exploited. The people who need the most end up paying the most. And they work sometimes 2 jobs, sometimes 3 jobs, just to make their ends meet. And this is not the system that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala devised for the human being. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is merciful, He's kind. He didn't give this system to the human being that he would remain a slave of the creation. Allah liberated the human being by giving His guidance to people. But people have chosen to reject that. And the result is they have fallen into this trap, and they have become slaves of systems that are opposed to the divine system. The slavery, not just of the human body, as we know that slavery was completely removed from the society. Before coming of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it was common. We know about Bilal radiallahu anhu, who was a slave. But these people accepted Islam, and the new Islam is the only way for salvation in this world and in the next world. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala elevated these people. The people who followed Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we know how in a short period of time their lives were transformed. And this can happen even today. The weak, the poor, the oppressed, if they know that there is a system that brings relief to them, they will accept it. And that's all over the world. People are oppressed. And in most cases, they do not even realize they're being oppressed. The slavery of the modern times is a very different type of slavery. People are working so hard just to satisfy their material needs. And the system is crushing them to a point where they cannot even think. So everywhere you go, you see the problems, and the problems relating to the health, depression, suicide, all kinds of abuses, child abuse, abuse of women. All these things happen because of an oppressive system. People get so frustrated, they take their anger out on anyone, could be their own families. How many millions of children are victims of child abuse because of parents being on alcohol or drugs or some other evil? How many crimes, how many prisons are full of people because of these things? If there's one alcoholic in the family, he can make life miserable not only for himself but also for the family and for the others. So it is to the advantage, in the interest of humanity, to look at this alternative system which is available, which is not being used for centuries, and to adopt it. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help humanity and guide them in the right direction. Wa akhirat dawana in alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.